Hello and welcome back to another guide video for the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. I am Sam with the Gent Mafia, and today we're going to be going over the Archer build. So archers are very fun. They're very rewarding. They also have a fairly high skill floor on them and potentially a very high skill ceiling. So I want to talk about the different kinds of races that you're going to want to use when you're building an archer. You don't necessarily have to use these races exclusively, although these ones are going to be a cut above the rest. And we're going to start off with the Argonians. Generally, if you're going to be an archer, you're going to want to have some sort of sneak, just because for the most part you're not going to be one-shotting things. You're not going to be able to get up into someone's face, so you're going to want to kind of be a little light on your feet and be able to kind of sneak around. Argonians have a natural buff to everything that you're going to want to kind of look into if you're going to want to be an archer. They have the light armor buff, they have a sneak buff, restoration, and generally if you're going to be sneaking anyways, you might as well have lockpicking and pickpocket. They also have a ability to breathe underwater, a natural resistance to disease, and they also have his skin to regenerate their health very quickly. They're not made for brawling, so if you do have someone get in your face and you don't want to switch over to, a sword or a mace or anything of the sort, you're going to want to regenerate your health quickly so that way you're able to stay in the fight longer and be able to shoot your arrows. So Argonians are great in that aspect. The next one I want to talk about are Khajiits, and honestly Khajiits would probably be my choice for an archer build. They're great for working around at night just because, like I was mentioning, sneak is important. They're great for working at night because they have Night Eye, which is going to allow them to see in the dark. They have an unarmed natural buff to them. They're going to do increased damage, so if you don't want to go ahead and use anything in the one-handed or the two-handed skill tree for when you have to get to brawling, this is going to make it so that way you can go ahead and have a physical option to kind of defend yourself. They also have buffs to archery naturally, lockpicking as well, pickpocket, and sneak, which is going to make it so that way it's better off for them. Next we're going to have the Nords. Nords are very good for this, especially if you're going to want to go ahead and switch over to something to where you're going to be able to use a weapon such as a sword. They have the resistance to frost, so that's going to allow you to keep your stamina up. No, they don't necessarily have anything that's going to have a natural starting point that's going to be buffs for the archery, but they do have smithing, which is going to be very good for going in and working with your light armor, which they also have a buff to as well. Red Guards are another option that I would like to highlight as well. They have buffs to archery, buffs to smithing, and buffs to one-handed as well, which are all things that you're going to want to kind of look at if you're going to be going into the archery build. They have a resistance to poison, and if you're getting into an archery match, there's a good chance that you're going to get hit with a poison. They also have Adrenaline Rush, which is going to make it so that way if you do go ahead and have to brawl it out, it's going to be a buff to them. And finally, I also want to talk about the Wood Elves. Wood Elves are going to be kind of the most thought about ones whenever you're going to go ahead and go into archery. They have buffs to alchemy, which is always great for any sort of class that you're going to be going into. A buff to archery, which is their highest. Light armor, which is also very important. Lockpick, pickpocketing, and sneak, which is generally things that you're going to be going into if you're going to be looking at an archer build. So after you've gone ahead and picked your race, we're going to be looking at the things that are under the stealth skill trees. There's archery, light armor, sneak, lockpick, pickpocket, speech, and alchemy. Now, honestly, the stuff that's in the stealth tree, most of these trees are just not that good, with the exception of the first three right here: archery, light armor, sneak. Alchemy as well is very good, but lockpicking, pickpocket, and speech. Speech is actually probably the worst skill tree in the game. That's why I've gone ahead and replaced it with this Dovahkiin perk. But for the most part, lockpicking and pickpocketing you don't necessarily need. They're basically just going to give you buffs to the kind of stuff that you can steal off of people. Speech is just going to give you kind of things so that way you can make more money when you're selling in shops. If you're looking for just a build where you want to go ahead and make a ton of money, by all means. But speech is one of the hardest things to level up in the game, and it quite frankly doesn't give you any perks that's going to help you advance in the game too well. However, the sneak, light armor, and archery will, and then if you are going to be using anything else, the one-handed and two-handed perk as well as the smithing are going to be things that you're going to want to look at as well. So we're going to start it off. I guess we'll work right to left on this one, which is going to be a little awkward, but we're going to start off with the sneak tree. So in the sneak tree, you're going to notice this is going to be kind of a general thing that's going to be with most of the skill trees. is you'll notice that they have kind of a base thing, and if you increase this, it's going to make this skill, you know, that much better. In stealth here, you are 20% harder to detect while sneaking. You have different ranks of this, just making it so that way you're harder and harder to notice. If you go to the left side, this is going to generally be where you're not as easy to notice, and on the right side is going to be more of a damage. If you're going to be going in working with the archery, you're definitely going to go ahead and focus on the right side. Make yourself more of an assassin. Definitely go ahead and do this. Backstab is wonderful. Works very, very well with daggers, and this is generally going to be what you're going to want to look at. One-handed weapons now do 6-time damage. Very, very low skill requirement at only a 30 to go ahead and get the perk Backstab. Then at 40 you have Deadly Aim. Sneak attacks with bows now do 3-time damage, which is phenomenal because generally when you're dealing with your bow, you're going to be at a range to where you'll notice the enemy before they notice you. So go ahead and add that 3 times damage onto your bow early on and go ahead and pick them down the rest of the way. And then lastly, there is Assassin's Blade. Level 50 requirement, very, very low with how easy it is to increase sneak. Assassin's Blade here, sneak attacks with daggers now do 8 times normal damage. That is absolutely insane, especially when you get in a late game. You can absolutely kill people, and then you can also add that up with the backstab as well. You're going to be doing just an obscene amount of damage. On the left side, you have muffle movement. Your armor does less noise. Lightfoot won't trigger pressure plates. This isn't a terrible thing to go into, especially with only a level 40. Although for the most part, pressure plates are very easy to notice. Silent roll, this thing is just kind of meh, whatever. Silence, walking and running does not affect your detection, which is pretty helpful, especially if you want to move around quickly and not have to worry about, you know, being detected. And then lastly is Shadow Warrior at level 100. Crouching stops combat for a moment and forces distant opponents to search for a target. This is a little bit OP, honestly. Sneak is quite an OP skill tree. Highly recommend investing into this, especially if you're going to be an archer. I very much recommend, especially the right side of the tree. This one is not bad, although by the time you get to sneak level 100, for the most part you're going to be one-shotting, especially if you go into the right side of the tree, to where the entire left side of the skill tree will not be important. So for essentially 9 perks, 9 levels, you can have the stealth tree essentially maxed out how you would want it. Next is light armor. Light armor is very, very important. This would probably be the thing that you're going to want to focus on probably second if you're going to be making an archer, especially if you have it to where you're going to be a brawler. So tier 1, it's going to make it so that way your light armor just absorbs more damage for you. Custom fit makes it so that way you have a bonus. And then you go into the split here. On the left side, you have unhindered over here on the left side. Light armor weighs nothing and it does not slow you down when it's worn. This doesn't really matter just because light armor is already light. It does not weigh you down that much, but there is also the Steed Stone, which is going to make it so that way any armor that you're wearing does not do that anyways, so you can honestly avoid this perk. Next we have Windwalker. Stamina regenerates 50% faster in all light armor. And then lastly at level 100 is Deft Movement. 10% chance of avoiding all damage from a melee attack while wearing a full set of light armor. They don't have to be matching. This is great. The thing that you're really going to want to focus on though is the right side of the skill tree. So after custom fit, I would just go right into the right side. This is a requirement of 70, so by the time you get this, that's fine. Matching set, additional 25% armor bonus if wearing a matching set of light armor. So if you're decked out in full glass, matching set is going to get this bonus, and then like I said, you can go into Deft Movement. So very, very important. I would definitely look into Agile Defender the most. This is going to be something that's very important when you're getting into your kind of combat. Next, and the most important skill in your entire build is going to be archery. Definitely focus on your damage. Your damage is your most important thing. Overdraw level 1 is going to be the most important thing. Anytime you get a chance to buff this, absolutely do it. Go ahead and make that stronger. The second thing that you're going to do after you get to level 3, I guess, would be go ahead and pick up Critical Shot here. It's going to allow you to do critical damage, and this is just, you know, it's more damage, which is not a bad thing. It's going to make it so that way you won't have to switch off your bow as much, and go ahead and just do more damage. Next we have to level 50. Go ahead and pick this up. It's going to make it so that way you can pick up twice as many dead arrows off of, or dead arrows. Yeah, why not? Dead arrows off that dead ass dead body. Then you have Ranger. You're able to move quicker while you're drawing your bow. This is very helpful if you're getting into a kind of shootout. You could potentially get into it with another archer, and just being able to strafe back and forth is just going to be good for you. Although this isn't necessarily going to be the greatest perk in the tree, it's definitely worth picking up. Last, you have Bullseye, which is going to give you a chance to paralyze your opponent. This is incredibly powerful, especially if you're dealing with an enemy that is an absolute tank. If you go ahead and paralyze them and they can't move, you can just go ahead and sit there and rapidly shoot at them. The left side of the tree is not that bad either. We're going to go ahead and you start off with Eagle Eye. If you press your block button, you can zoom in. Steady Hand makes it so that way you can slow time. I don't necessarily like this. I just don't think it's necessary, although it will make it so that way you can hit your shots a lot more consistently. If you want to go ahead and invest into this, absolutely do it, although I don't necessarily think this is the most required perk. Next one, you have Power Shot. Arrow staggers all but the largest opponents 50% of the time. This is very, very powerful. I highly recommend picking this up. The zoom is not bad. It's just going to make it so that way it's easier for you to hit. But Power Shot is very, very strong. And then you also have Quick Shot. You can draw your bow 30% faster. Very important. Highly recommend picking up almost every single perk in the archery tree, with the exception of the Steady Hand. But they're kind enough to go ahead and make this a little thing in the middle so you don't have to pick it up. Next you want to kind of look at is your one-handed. One-handed is something if you are just kind of going to have a second damage option. If you are going to go ahead and brawl, you're definitely going to want to look at the one-handed. It's going to kind of, just depend. The most important thing is going to be the Armsman, and this is also going to go off of the sneak skill. Armsman is very important, and then followed up by Fighting Stance. With a low requirement of 20, this is not a bad option. Power attack's very, very strong, but if you're going into the sneak tree, and especially if you could go ahead and stick to the right side of the sneak tree, that's going to heavily favor the daggers. You can potentially look at Dual Flurry, where you're going to be able to do increased damage, especially with daggers. That's going to give you insane DPS, but then you also have the Blazeman, which is going to give you crit damage. This is very, very powerful when you have everything all put together. The next thing we're going to look at is smithing. So smithing, I think, is good for any kind of build. This is going to make it so that way you can buff your weapons and your armor even more. If you are going to be going into Archer, and more than likely you will end up picking the light armor skill tree. So you can go ahead and jump to the left side. You have the Elven armor, the scaled and plate armors, then you have the glassmith, and then next you will have dragon. There's also the Arcane Blacksmith at level 60, which is going to make it so that way you can increase the magical weapons and the magical armor that you're going to pick up. So you're going to be able to buff those as well. Highly recommend going into the smithing tree if you're going to be any sort of a melee build / archer build. Next, we're going to talk about enchanting. Enchanting is another one that's great for pretty much every single class. The one that you're going to want to focus on the most is the enchanter. This is just going to make it so that way all of your enchantments are that much stronger. And then the next thing you will have is the right side of the tree. The right side of the tree is basically going to make it so that way you can absorb more damage, and the left side is going to be more of your damage ones. This is basically going to be off of your frost, fire. Also going to give you so that way you have natural resistance to these kind of abilities. You also have over here, if I can go ahead and jump to it, this is going to be, this is usually going to be something that you're going to equip on like a dagger. You can use it with bows and arrows, although sometimes you will be out of range. It all just kind of depends how you're going. Soul Squeezer is something that is pretty helpful. So when you're using a bow, you might throw an enchantment on the bow. You might put a lightning enchantment on it. If you use that, eventually you're going to run out of a charge on it, and so you're not going to have that buff. But the Soul Squeezer is going to make it so that way you get that much more out of your soul gems. It's very, very helpful, especially for such a low requirement of 20. I would highly recommend picking this up. This may not be the top priority in your build, although if you're going on and you have an extra perk left over and you're not quite sure what to put it into, going ahead and going into the Soul Squeezer just to give yourself a little bit of a buff is a high recommendation for me. Last thing I really want to touch on is the alchemy tree. So the reason why this would be important, especially if you're going into a sneak build, is going to be the poisons as well as the potions. Potions are very obvious. Healing your health is awesome, but if you're going to be using a bow, if you just want to add that little extra bit of damage to where you don't want to switch over to a melee weapon, the poisons are going to really help push you over that. Alchemist is a great way to do that. Just like all the other things, it's going to make it so that way any poison you make is that much stronger without jumping across like that. We have Physician. This is just going to be for your potions mostly. On the left side of the skill tree is where you're going to deal with your poisons. Poisons are 25% more effective. That's a very low requirement at 30. Concentrated poisons. Poisons applied to a weapon last for twice as many hits. So depending on how it goes, you can get 2 hits out of a single poison. And then you have Green Thumb, which is going to make it so that way you can harvest more. That's not bad. Anytime you go into an alchemy, this is not a bad perk to pick up. You also have Snake Blood, 50% resistance to all poisons. This is great if you're going against things like Falmer. The only issue is it's a very, very high skill requirement at 80. So it's a little iffy. And then lastly, you have Purity. It's going to make it so that way all of your poisons or your potions are absolutely pure. They're just not going to have any positive effects on them, or they're not going to have any negative effects on them, depending on what you're going to look into. So for the most part, that was an archery build. Definitely focus on the archery aspect the most. Follow that up with light armor. That's going to be kind of the main thing. And then depending on what you want to do, I would recommend either having the one-handed or the alchemy, depending on whichever one you kind of want to focus on. And then smithing, enchanting, and of course the alchemy are going to be the things that you look at next. Sneak, very, very important. This will just come with time. This is just going to be phenomenal for you. But I'd like to thank you guys for checking out this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Join the family, guys. I will be back with more videos for you. Thank you.